Hello out there, and today we are taking a look at a new for 2021 design from CRKT and Lucas Burnley, and this one right here is called the Heron. And this was, of all of the new CRKTs, probably the one that I was most immediately excited about, just because I really like the blade shape and the blade design. I like a lot of the things that Lucas Burnley does, and I saw this handle scale and I thought, all right, well, that's a little bit different, and it piqued my interest in a way that a lot of the new knives this year just haven't. So yeah, I was super stoked to get this. I only unboxed this a couple hours ago, and I've got to tell you, there's some good things about the knife, but it certainly isn't a love at first sight, first impression, that's for sure. There are some aspects of it that I really do not care for either. So we're going to talk about all that. I'll get you the information that you need in order to make an informed decision for yourself. Have an understanding that these are selling for around $35, maybe a little bit less depending on where you find it. So yeah, this is a more budget, affordable, economic kind of knife made in China. So let's just get started and talk about some of the things that might fit into the same size category. We have a cutting edge here that is exactly, maybe just slightly under 3 inches. So that might be intentional in that it helps it fit into a number of categories that make it legal in more places than some other knives. As you can see, it is a little bit more hefty up and down than something similar lengthwise as the Kershaw Leak. Let's see what else we have here. Let's bring in the Spyderco Tenacious, which is a little bit of a larger knife. Here is another Burnley, probably the best CRKT Burnley, and that is the Squid. And then last but not least, we will do the 943. All right, so those are some comparisons. Obviously, this one is a little bit less of a sleek knife, a little bit more robust, and not necessarily chunky, but again, it does have that height that makes it a little bit more stout. As far as weight goes, we are dealing with a stainless steel frame lock here with not too much interior weight relief. This is listed at 3.8 ounces. It's over 4. It's 4.03, 4 ounces. So again, it felt a little bit hefty when I had it in the box. I was like, oh man, this is a dense knife. And yeah, it is that, but once you get it in hand, that sort of disappears, and it's not awkward in terms of the balance of it. So it's not going to be necessarily a bad thing. So let's get focused and started with some of the features of this knife, and let's take a look at this blade. The blade is, for me, a huge selling point. It's extremely good looking, a little bit of belly, almost a Warncliffe. It's named the Heron, and as you might know, a lot of the Lucas Burnley designs do have like animal names. The Squid has an appropriate name because it looks like a squid, and the Heron, this really does remind me of a bird. Maybe not quite a heron, but it does have like a bird kind of shaped blade. The best feature of the blade, though, is the swedge. It's just a really good looking swedge, goes all the way down to the tip, provides a little bit of robustness there as well. I'm just a big fan of the blade overall. We are working with 8CR 14 MOV here, so it is a budget steel. For all of my needs, though, this will be just fine. You can see that stone wash. It's a nice little black wash finish on there. Very attractive. Came razor sharp out of box. One thing to note is that this is listed, it's not listed, the grind at least is not on CRKT's website. It's listed on Blade HQ as flat. It might be flat. It feels like there's a deep plunge right here where the grind starts, where it could be, a bit of a more hollow grind, but regardless, it does terminate pretty thin is what I'm getting at here. So a good grind on this knife, even though it does start pretty far down on that that blade. There's a large flat, which you don't usually see. So we have all that going for us. Here's a different look at that swedge. Just super attractive. And then as we move on back, let's take a look. And here's a really great aspect of the knife. Take a look at that jimping. It's pretty. It looks good. I don't understand. Look at that. I mean, you can see from there, that it's going to be jimping that you can lock into. So yeah, you've got that really, really nice purchase because it digs right in, not too sharp, just grabs the thumb pretty darn well. So impressed with the jimping. Nice to see that on a knife from CRKT at this price point. All right, as we move back to the frame, as you can see, and as I said earlier, there's really no weight relief here, so you just got a nice slab of stainless steel, and that's where that 4 ounces plus comes from. The lockup and the engagement is pretty darn good here. Nothing really noteworthy about the pivot. It's just a standard little cheap T8 pivot. So nothing special there. Here's the talking point. And yeah, I said earlier, guys, that this was something about the knife that made it stand out and made it interesting for me, but I don't know, man. I hate it. I didn't think I'd hate it, but I hate it. And this was marketed, and it's in the description on every website, that these are inlays. Here's a look at the knife closed. It's marketed as inlays, the carbon fiber layer, which would have been cool if they had machined this G10 out and then laid this in and made it one flat surface, but it's not really an inlay. It might, no, it's not. You can see how it is on that edge of that scale. It's just sitting on top. So, you know, I thought maybe for a second it was depressed in there and then there were still these ridges, but no, it's, I mean, you can, you know, so that's sort of a bummer. For an ergonomic standpoint, it does give you points of contact. It's not sharp, so I guess that's okay. But, you know, cheap carbon fiber, this cheap laminate, you know, sort of glossy stuff can be good when it's used well. And this is not the best expression of this CF that I've ever seen. And I'm going to try to take it off. So I'll let you know how that goes, maybe at the end of this video. So stay tuned for that. I don't know. I don't know, guys. It just, this knife would be better without it. Bottom line, if it was just a tan piece of G10, better without it. So that's sort of a bummer because it, you know, you see something different and unique and you want to be excited and support it. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to pick up the knife. But at the end of the day, just the execution of it and what it tends to be in reality just makes you wish it was more like everything else, and that's not what we want to see. So it is what it is. All right, so let's keep traveling on back. We have a backspacer right here. Seems like a plastic one, pretty big lanyard hole, but it doesn't really interfere with anything in terms of pocket clip. So, you know, the pocket clip is a nice loop over. A little bit of real estate just because of where it's located, but it is a pretty decent clip. CRKT with this tip up clip, they've had quite a few of them in this style. It works out pretty well. I don't know. There's a body screw right here, so they couldn't really have moved it much further. So, yeah, if you're looking for something super deep, you're not really going to get it, but for my needs, it's just fine. When we take a look at this knife locking up, the engagement is pretty solid. It's active. I like the way it engages. My problem with the knife in the opening and closing is just that it was super stiff out of box, and there was zero, I mean like literally zero detent. And you know, it was tightened way beyond the point that it needed to be tightened. And so I loosened it up, lubricated it. Again, taking it apart is something that I'm planning to do. Stay tuned either to the end of this video or a future video, and I'll have that posted. But taking it apart might help remedy that and get things like flowing a little bit better with some lubrication and cleaning. But the opening, it's just, I don't know, it's just an odd knife to open in some ways. The slow roll is really nice, super easy. So we have that going for us. The flick just, it works, but it just doesn't have this nice snappy action. The detent just isn't particularly good on this knife. You can spider flick it. Again, this has taken some time for me to get used to it, but yeah, I have been able to do that. We are running on Teflon washers. For anyone who says Teflon is the problem, it isn't. Teflon isn't a terrible material. Sometimes knives just aren't made well, and those knives happen to have Teflon a lot of the time. So, you know, CRKT has done a better job with Teflon than on this knife. I'll say that. We'll see what we can do with it. Overall, my first impression, my first look, it's a nice design. It's something that I'm not upset that I spent the money on, but I really just don't get this. And, you know, I feel like a big part of the value, when we talk about bang for our buck with Chinese imports, a big part of the value and a big part of that wow factor for people when they get a knife in their hands is just the way that it opens and closes, and that authoritative sound, and having the action dialed in. And it's a big thing that I look to, and it's just not great here. So having it not great, I mean, it's fine. Again, if you buy this knife to use it, and you need an EDC tool or whatever, then yeah, that has nothing to do with how the knife's going to perform. So, you know, don't think that is a knock on the potential performance of the knife, but it's just something you look for in terms of quality. Once you've seen 1,000 knives, you know, and you've seen what other companies can do at the $35 price point, you hope to see something of a better quality than that. And then the other thing is, yeah, just the scale. It's a bummer. So this is a decent knife. If you really like the lines of it, you might still enjoy it. I definitely would like the opportunity, and I will have the opportunity to really use this knife, and maybe a follow-up in the future, a follow-up video will paint a different picture once I use it, and if I enjoy the hell out of that, which I think I will. But as it is, just first impression, first look, there's some serious red flags that I think I won't be the only person to be putting up. I'll say that. So yeah, let's see what we can do about some of this stuff, and then we will wrap up the video. All right, guys, so I have taken apart this CRKT Heron here, and it is remarkably unremarkable inside. It's exactly what you would expect. You have your pivot, you have a couple body screws, you have the housings for the body screws on the other side. The body screws, in my experience, they rotated together, so you needed like tube drivers in order to take it apart. Whatever, it was fine. Here's the frame. You can see, like I said, remarkably unremarkable, nothing really special there. And then we have the scale, and you might already be able to tell that I'm trying to get this carbon fiber off, because screw this stuff. It sucks. I just hate it in this scenario, and I've been the guy to argue for laminate CF in the past, and it just is not, it's just not done well here. And so, you know, I'm trying to get this with a box cutter blade, and that's not going to work. I mean, whatever budget they were trying to meet with by using budget materials, they sure didn't skimp on the glue or the epoxy for this piece of CF across the board here. So I'm going to end up just using a Dremel and just like sanding it down and removing it completely, and maybe having to, you know, even out the layer of the G10. But there's really no traction on the G10 as it is, so I'm not worried about losing that. And then I'm going to dye the scale and, yeah, have it look completely different. So I'll probably do that right now and just get you a look at it before the end of this video. After removing those carbon fiber pieces, there's a little bit of unevenness in this scale, so I'm going to do some quick mod work to give it some texturing so that it looks intentional. You can see, I mean, it just using a Dremel tool, which basically I use like these types of bits or these types of attachments, or the Dremel. Unfortunately, it was this one. You know, it just, the speed it goes at, it's a little bit coarse, and so it's just hard to remove that glued on stuff and still have an even texture at the bottom. So we're going to try to take care of this and create a scale that still looks visually appealing. So let's do that. I am now finished doing the mod work on the scale. So what happened with the unevenness of this texture because of the removal of that carbon fiber, I had to do something in order to make it look uniform and intentional. And I could have, I guess, just sanded it down and taken some layers, I guess, of the G10 off and made it even that way. But it just seemed easier to do a little bit more of like a texturing here, and this should make it potentially, I don't know, maybe a little bit more ergonomic as well. Thankfully, the color of the scale was tan, and so that's just very agreeable to dyeing. I dyed this a evening blue, I believe is the RIT dye color. It works. You know, I think it looks pretty darn good. I'm stoked about it. It probably will, at the end of the day, be more reminiscent of a Heron as well, being that, like, Herons, a lot of them are blue. All right. So let's put the thing back together and see how it is. So this is it, guys. I have had this knife back together for about, 10 minutes, and I've adjusted it and opened and closed it 1,000 times. Functionally, it is just fine. I don't know that the action is ever going to be, anything too fantastic. It just sort of is what it is. It's mediocre at best. But one of the big red flags for me, certainly the scales has been addressed and fixed, and I'm pretty darn stoked about the look of it now too. Just the lightness of that blue not being too dark against the dark blade. Yeah, I think it came out pretty darn great. So yeah, I'm happy about it. I'll definitely carry this knife. And the design, which I think I've shown today, for me at least, is one that is a winner, despite some of the decision making from CRKT with what they did with it. The lines, I mean, can make a pretty darn cool knife. And so yeah, I mean, I wish they would have done that from the get-go with some of that stuff and saved me the time, but as it is, I'll be happy with this one, and hopefully you've been informed about the Heron and the way it is from factory. So any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know. Let me know if you actually liked the way that that original scale looked, even with those carbon fiber pieces sitting on top of that G10. Like, let me know what your thoughts are on this and CRKT and Burnley designs in general. Which one is your favorite? All right, I'll talk with you soon, guys. Take care. Thanks for watching.